she never meant to open it. It was an accident, really. A mix-up at the post office. A package with her neighbor's name, but her address. And inside, nestled among bubble wrap, was a simple, leather-bound journal. Her name was Alara, and her neighbor, a reclusive old man named Arthur, was someone she'd only ever exchanged brief nods with. Curiosity, that insistent whisper, got the better of her. She told herself it would be just one page. The first entry was dated 50 years ago. The handwriting, a graceful, looping script, spoke of a young man full of dreams. He wrote about a girl named Lily, her laughter like wind chimes, her eyes the color of the summer sky. He wrote about their secret meetings in the old town square, beneath the clock tower that had long since been torn down. Alara felt a blush creep up her neck, like she was intruding on something sacred. But she couldn't stop. Page after page, she fell into Arthur's past. He wasn't just the quiet old man who shuffled to his mailbox. A was a poet, a dreamer, an artist who sketched Lily's face in the margins of every page. He described the scent of rain on pavement on the night he first told her he loved her, the taste of the cheap coffee they shared at a late-night diner, the way her hand felt in his. Alara found herself walking the streets of her own town, but seeing them through Arthur's eyes, a town alive with ghosts of a beautiful love story. Then the tone shifted. The entries grew shorter, the ink smudged in places. There was talk of a misunderstanding, a fight. Lily's parents disapproved of him, an artist with no steady income. He wrote of a plan to elope, a meeting set for midnight at the train station. He was going to take her away, start a new life where their love was all that mattered. Alara's heart pounded in her chest. She held her breath as she turned the page to what she knew must be the next day. The entry was a single, blotchy sentence. She never came. After that, the journal was a wasteland of heartbreak. The vibrant descriptions of life were replaced with short, stark observations of the changing seasons. The sketches of Lily disappeared, replaced by blank pages. Arthur wrote about taking a job at the local factory, the one that now stood abandoned at the edge of town. He wrote about the silence in his small apartment, a silence that screamed Lily's name. He never loved again. He simply existed. The journal ended about 20 years ago. The final page is empty. Alara closed the book, her hands trembling. This wasn't just a story. It was a life lived in the shadow of a single night. The quiet, solitary man next door had a universe of love and loss inside him. She looked out her window at his house, the lights off as usual. How could she have lived next to this epic tragedy and never known? The next day, she saw Arthur in his garden, tending to a small patch of wilting roses. Steeling her nerves, she walked over. She couldn't tell him about the journal, of course, so she just said, "Those are beautiful roses. They remind me of a story I once read, about a woman named Lily." Arthur Frosse. He slowly turned to look at her, his eyes, clouded with age, suddenly sharp and piercing. For the first time, Alara saw the young man from the journal, a flicker of pain, of memory, of a life he thought was long buried. He didn't say a word, just stared at her. Alara's heart was in her throat. Had she made a terrible mistake? She loved roses, he said, his voice a dry rasp, a sound she'd never heard before, especially the white ones. He gestured to a single, stubborn white rose blooming amidst the dying red ones. From that day on, something changed. Alara would bring him a cup of tea in the afternoons. At first, they sat in silence. Then, she started talking, telling him about her day, her mundane work problems, the funny things her cat did. He would just listen, nodding occasionally. One day, she found a small, perfectly ripe tomato on her doorstep. The next day, a small bouquet of wildflowers. They were small gestures, quiet acknowledgments, a bridge being built over a chasm of silence and time. She learned he had worked his whole life at the factory, saving every penny. He never traveled, never married. He lived in the same house his parents had left him, the house he was meant to leave with Lily. He never spoke of her again, and Alara never mentioned her name. But Lily was always there, an unseen presence in the stories they didn't tell. One autumn evening, as the leaves turned to gold and red, Alara received a call. It was a paramedic. Arthur had passed away peacefully in his sleep. When she was allowed into his house to collect a few things for a distant relative, She found it was just as she imagined, sparse, clean, and lonely. But on his nightstand, next to a dusty photograph of a smiling young woman with eyes like the summer sky, was the leather-bound journal, and tucked inside the front cover was a new, single sheet of paper. Elara unfolded it, her hands shaking. The handwriting was shaky, a pale imitation of the youthful script she knew so well. But it was his. It read, "To Elara, my neighbor. Thank you for bringing the roses back to my garden." Elara sat there, in the quiet of Arthur's house, and cried. She cried for the young man who lost his love, for the old man who died alone. But she also cried with a strange sense of peace. She had never meant to open his journal. It was an accident. But sometimes, accidents can lead us to the most profound and beautiful places. They can teach us that every quiet person we pass on the street has a story, a universe of love and loss we can't see. We just have to be willing to look, to listen, and sometimes to simply bring them a cup of tea. Thanks so much for watching. If this story touched you, please consider liking and subscribing. Every person has a story worth hearing. See you next time.